Hello and good evening. I'm Rohit Gandhi and you're watching Gravitas. It's been a day of big news today. Religion, wars and cricket. All of it involving an overflow of passion. In Turkey, misplaced passion is a religious war. Turned a New Year celebration to carnage. Before we discuss that horrific development, we turn our attention to India and two key decisions taken by the country's top court. Cricket is a sport that Indians follow with a passion. Today, the Indian Supreme Court sounded a warning bell for the sports administration. It's told it to shape up or be sacked. The Indian Cricket Board's president and secretary are refusing to fall in line. That's not all the court did, though. It also decided that the Indian politicians passionate about selling religion to get votes cannot anymore. A new Supreme Court judgment bars parties and politicians from doing just that. First up, WION's Karthikeya Sharma brings us this report on that crucial judgment.
Communal violence in India during election campaigning could be a thing of the past. A landmark Supreme Court judgment has banned appeals to religion by political parties. The court clearly laying down the elections are a secular exercise and appealing to the religion is a corrupt act.
वोट तो सबके पास एक है और सरकार बनती है देश को आगे ले जाने के लिए, तो जो पॉलिसी और नीति है वो तो सबके लिए बनना चाहिए। तो जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट का फैसला है मैं उसको बहुत जायज मानता हूँ।
दोनों हाथों से सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट को सलाम करते हैं और ये कड़ाई से लागू होना चाहिए। इस देश की राजनीति को जिन लोगों ने इसमें राजनीति में धर्म का समावेश किया है चुनाव में, उन्होंने भ्रष्ट करने का काम किया है। सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ये जजमेंट जो है संविधान की मर्यादा को रेस्टोर करने का काम है।
The ruling comes ahead of crucial elections in 5 states including Uttar Pradesh and Punjab.
There is a law of the land which says that you can't appeal to voters in the name of your religion or caste or community. You cannot use any religious place for your campaign. And so unfortunately, there was an increasing tendency to violate this law in letter and spirit. I'm sure this judgment will put an end to that tendency.
Figures with the Union Home Ministry has documented on an average 58 communal incidents every month between 2011 and 2015. A staggering 85% of these incidents took place in just 8 states: Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka. The Supreme Court judgment will have a direct bearing on the elections in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. Both the states have witnessed the upheaval of religion-induced politics by political parties. But now with the order in place, it seems the coming elections will be less volatile. Karthikeya Sharma for WION.
That wasn't the only big decision taken by India's Supreme Court today. It was back in focus yet again as it clamped down on the Board of Control for Cricket in India for not implementing the administrative reform suggested by the Lodha Committee. This long-running tussle came to a head today, with the court dismissing the board's president and secretary. This report has more of the details.
The Supreme Court axe finally fell on the necks of the two administrators of India's premier cricket body, the Board of Control for Cricket in India. Anurag Thakur and Ajay Shirke have been removed for refusing to accept the Lodha Committee recommendations.
There were obstructions, there were impediments. We fixed the timelines that was not adhered to. We submitted 3 reports before the Supreme Court. Even then it was not implemented. Obviously this was to happen and this has happened.
A new interim administration under the senior-most vice president and interim secretary will take over after giving an undertaking that it will accept the Lodha panel report. The recommendations put forth by the Lodha panel include: 1 vote for each state in the BCCI elections, no office for ministers or civil servants, no BCCI office bearer to be more than 70 years old, no person can hold office in the BCCI and state simultaneously, fixed limit of 3 3-year terms for officials and no consecutive terms. Thakur tweeted his disappointment.
For me, it was not a personal battle. It was a battle for the autonomy of the sports body. I respect Supreme Court as any citizen should. Supreme Court judges feel that BCCI could do better under retired judges. I wish them all the best. I'm sure Indian cricket will do well under their guidance. My commitment to the best of Indian cricket and autonomy of sports will always remain.
The Supreme Court did not recommend bringing the BCCI under the Right to Information Act or legalizing betting and some other measures. But there could be moves to push forward the Model Sports Bill to clean up Indian sports. Bureau Report, WION.
One of the challenges India's sports bodies have been facing, they have been accused of large-scale corruption, of inaction, and sometimes just heavy handling of the players. And that's certainly be one of those challenges. We'll take those stories on a bit later in the show. So stay with us on the broadcast as we discuss both these stories, the religion and how the political parties can't use it anymore, and also how sports administration needs to be streamlined in India. But let's turn our attention to the big discussion for tonight. The New Year Eve saw Turkey come to terms with another carnage, another tragedy that saw 39 people lose their lives. 8 persons have been arrested, but the killer is still at large. The lone perpetrator of the deadly attack on Riana, a nightclub, is one of the most well-guarded parts of Istanbul, has claimed by the Islamic State as its own heroic soldier. IS Chief Abu Bakr Baghdadi and his supporters have reportedly called for more attacks in Turkey. But the question on everyone's mind is this: just what does the Islamic State, with its brand of Islamist extremism, hope to achieve in the secular state set up by its founder, Kemal Atatürk? Here's a report.
It took them more than 26 hours to claim the deadly terror attack on Istanbul's Rayna nightclub on New Year's Day, but claim it they did. The Islamic State said it was a heroic soldier of the Caliphate who had carried out the bloodbath. The murderer is on the run and his link to the Islamic State has yet to be proved. But the deadly attack has yet again raised a familiar question. Is Turkey a modern Islamic state, as envisaged by its founding father, Kemal Atatürk? Or is the only Islamic majority country that straddles Europe and Asia ready to embrace Islamist extremism? The answer may lie in the Islamic State's unusual hesitation over claiming responsibility for the massacre. Turkey is, after all, a Muslim majority country. Though mostly foreigners, most killed in the brutal attack were Muslims too. Owning up to such a crime may have incurred the wrath, not the sympathies of Turkey's 75 million citizens. Opinion polls in Turkey have repeatedly shown a marked trend that 74% of Turks wants to stay secular, while only 12% supports a Sharia state. So what then does the Islamic State hope to achieve by attacking civilians in Turkey? Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has sworn to fight terror groups, but in the past, his own confidants have sparked protests by demanding a religious constitution. Turkey is a NATO member state and aspires for full membership of the mostly Christian European Union too, a fact that has prompted President Erdogan to defend secularism. So what is the all-powerful head of state up to? What many other global politicians practice too, a balancing act to appease both the country's Islamists as well as its secularists. And as long as the latter have the upper hand, even the most brutal acts of terror in Turkey by the Islamic State are unlikely to achieve the terror group's nefarious goals. Padma Rao, WION.
It's clear that Turkey is in a state of turmoil with repeated attacks taking place on some of its biggest cities. To discuss this on the story further, WION's West Asia Bureau Chief Anchal Vora is in Istanbul and she joins us from there. Also on the broadcast with me is Mohsin Mughal. He's an executive producer at TRT World International News. He joins us from Istanbul as well. Let me go out to Anchal with a question first. Anchal, explain to me what's really happening on the ground there. Have they been able to find out who's behind all of this?
It wore a completely deserted look, a spot that was frequented by the likes of Uma Thurman and Salma Hayek wore an eerie look. The security forces have completely cordoned off that area. Outside were flowers that were sent by the people of Istanbul in the memory of those who were killed in that terror attack. 39 died and 70 were injured. These 70 people are in different hospitals in Istanbul, still recovering. Even though ISIS has claimed the attack, there is still no surety as to what was the link between the attacker and the terror group ISIS. Was there any structural link, or was this person just inspired by the terror network?
Mohsen, how are ordinary Turks reacting to the terror attacks? Whom do they blame?
Well, there's absolute shock, Rohit, in Turkey, particularly in Istanbul. Well, Istanbul has seen terror attacks before as well. People absolutely shocked. There is no one directly to blame at the moment because it's all subject to investigations. We know that Daesh has claimed responsibility, but the investigating agencies are not leaving any other anything to actually. They're not leaving any room for any further questions. They're trying to ascertain who exactly this person is. What is important to mention here is that this person is still at large. Only 8 people have been arrested, detained so far for questioning, and of course there are searches and cordons happening around the city and across the country as well. People definitely disturbed, but the investigations are ongoing. There's a certain degree of alarm amongst the country, within the country as well, but that hasn't stopped people from coming out and carrying on their routine as they would on any given day. Yes, there is a bit of caution, as would be everywhere in any country, but then there is this resilience in the country.
Mohsen, but what if I asked you, do you think that there is support for the Islamic State in Turkey?
Well, I don't think there is any support because the state per se is carrying out operations against Islamic State, against PKK as well, beyond their borders, along with their borders. So there isn't any support. If at all there would be, you wouldn't see these attacks happening and targeting civilians. Now we've seen attacks taking place at the airport. We've seen attacks taking place at the city center. We've seen attacks, an attack that happened in Fatih a few months ago, where civilians became the eventual target. So it's definitely not the common people who would support the terrorists. It's definitely not the state or any other actor. What I can say is there is a lot of anger against these terror acts at the moment. That's what I can gather from speaking after having spoken to many people here.
Thank you. What is it like in Istanbul right now? An attack on New Year's Eve, which surely would have jolted the city and its people. Anchal.
Well, there have been several such terror attacks in Turkey over the last year, so much so that it's almost become cab chat. So as we were driving around Istanbul, a cab driver showed us several spots, including the football stadium outside of which recently there was a terror attack. Many people again were killed there, and that attack was claimed by PKK, which is the Kurdish separatist group. The militants of this group have been also attacking Turkish citizens. There have been several attacks conducted by them.
Mohsen, in your opinion, do you find that Turkey is becoming more conservative, Islamist?
Well, I wouldn't say that because the Constitution clearly enshrines that this is a secular state. And I would think that it would be a question probably better asked to someone who understands the historical context of the Turkish society, probably a sociologist, a historian, or someone who's expert at understanding how the society has evolved. But what I can tell you is the basic nature of the society has been very liberal, has been very secular, and that is still the case. I can see, well, there are two opinions. There is one Western opinion. There are articles being written around which are definitely devoid of the reality on the ground that I'm seeing. There is there is definitely a sense of anger against that kind of that kind of propaganda or information, which doesn't really come true when you see things at the ground.
All right, Mohsen, thank you very much for that perspective. Thank you, Anchal from Istanbul, and we'll keep following that story. It seems a number of factors are at play when it comes to the situation in Turkey. Its intervention in Syria notwithstanding. On that note, thank you, Anchal and Mohsen, for joining us with your inputs. The story, we're going to move on to the next of our big talking points tonight. The often freewheeling approach of Indian politicians to political campaigning, which combines extravagant promises with appeals to religion or caste, is being curbed. The Indian Supreme Court has banned all appeals in the name of religion or caste, also language and community, a landmark judgment with possible transformative effect on the Indian elections. To discuss the import of this watershed decision, we are now joined by Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. The challenge which we have seen in the last many decades is politicians have preyed on caste and religion and have asked for votes. And this in itself has thrown back the Indian democracy many, many decades. The idea of establishing a pure democracy based on a secular democracy was that people would not mix what you call church and state. But that has been certainly a big challenge as we move forward with that. The Supreme Court finally came out with a decision saying we have to put an end to that. And that is one of the things which will have to be implemented by the Election Commission in this coming up election which is coming up for the state. Joining me now is Mr. S.Y. Qureshi. He has been the Chief Election Commissioner for years. Mr. Qureshi, big decision there by the Supreme Court of India. Explain to us, how is it going to pan out? Is it possible for the Election Commission to even figure out and handle this?
Yes. Yes, it's a great decision, and it is actually a reiteration of what already existed in law in the Representation of People Act, Section 123. Any appeal to voters to vote in the name of religion or caste, or restrain or stop somebody voting in the name of religion was forbidden already. Also in the same act and same section, you could not use religious symbols in your campaign. Then there is another act, independent act, which says that you cannot use any institution of worship for your political campaign. Which all these laws actually meant that there should be very secular approach in fighting elections. Sure. That has been reiterated by the Supreme Court, and I'm so happy it has come at the right time when we are in the election season.
Sure. Mr. Qureshi, anybody looking at the broadcast will, and any Indian citizen who would be looking at this would be saying, this is all enshrined in the Constitution. This all sounds great, but are these implementable? How do you think political parties will abide by it? How do you think the courts will implement it?
It is very much implementable. I just heard some political parties, including the BJP spokesman on one channel just a few minutes ago, and they also welcomed the judgment, and they said that they have enough secular issues to contest the election on, like the development issues. I think total support which has come from all parties, including the BJP, is very, very significant, and I'm sure they will respect this judgment in letter and spirit.
We've had cases where politicians giving inciting speeches and extorting voters on caste and religious grounds. Some of them were even convicted. Is the new law stronger?
Well, the law already existed, and Supreme Court has only emphasized that that law has to be followed. Actually, there was some ambiguity from 1996 in the famous or infamous Hindutva judgment of Justice J.S. Verma, an iconic judge, no doubt, where he had said that Hindutva is not a religion, it's a way of life, which implied that you could appeal in the name of Hindutva. So I think that probably gets clarified, although we haven't read the judgment in detail, but I spoke to some constitutional experts, and that is the impression they gave me, that this in a way changes what was being interpreted after the Hindutva judgment of 1996.
Certainly, there have been tremendous challenges, Mr. Qureshi, with the way elections have unfolded in the last many decades in India. Religion was commonly appealed at for people to make decisions. There are a lot of incitement which was taking place. Do you think it's going to change tremendously things, the way elections unfold from this election onwards?
Well, actually, I couldn't hear you very clearly because the audio was
Dr. Qureshi, what I was saying was... I'll repeat it. What I'm saying is, certainly politicians have used and abused religion for decades now. Do you think they will have to completely change tack from now onward? They'll have to be careful. They can't use religion for politicking, and that will be a massive change in how elections unfolded in India.
Yes, I'm sure they will, because the implication of this order is that any appeal to religion or misuse of religion will be considered a corrupt practice. And corrupt practice is enough ground for unseating somebody who has been elected and disqualifying him for the future, which is a great deterrent. Nobody would like to get unseated. Therefore, I'm very sure that they will all be very, very careful now.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Qureshi, for joining us for this show and giving us your perspective. On that note, we take a short break on Gravitas. When we return, the other big story that is headlining in India, the Supreme Court clamping down on BCCI top brass for refusing to introduce administrative reforms. More on that when we return. Stay with us on Gravitas.